It's time for a January reading wrap-up. I think I had a good reading month in January. I did read a few short books, so that really helped, and I really took advantage of audiobooks and my local library. So I feel like I had a good range and it was nice. I had a really fun time with that, and the books that I read kind of fell into two different categories. Either kind of into cozy mysteries with a bit of fantasy, or feminist theory. I read some sort of books that I wouldn't usually read and had a good time. Let's start with my new favourite series, which is the Shady Hollow series by Juno Black. Juno Black is a pseudonym for the two authors, Jocelyn Cole and Sharon Nagel. They have created the most whimsical, cottagecore, vibey little town full of animals that act like human beings without any modern technology, like there's no phones or anything. So it's just pure escapism and very sweet and funny and cozy and not my usual kind of thing that I'd read or pick up. I actually just saw the first book by chance at a local library I went to, and it was sort of on the top like a display. And I had never seen it before, and I was like, oh, that's cute. And it was in the adult fiction section, but it kind of has that whimsical cover of a children's or middle grade or young adult book. I read the blurb and I was like, oh, it's a murder mystery in a town full of animals. Cool. This is my thing. Animals being... No, that's not my thing. I don't want animals to be murdered, but apart from that, I do want to live in this town. I don't know which animal I'd be. Maybe I'd be... I relate a little bit to the main character's best friend, who's a raven, and she owns a bookshop. And I'm just like, oh, dream. Vera Vixen is a fox who is the main character in the series. She is a reporter for the local paper in the town of Shady Hollow. One of the local creatures who was not well liked, a taciturn toad, if you will, died under mysterious, suspicious circumstances, and Vera is off to find out about what happened and if there is foul play afoot. So each little book follows the same characters and Vera as the main character, but with a different mystery to be solved. For the second book, I didn't even read the blurb. I just put it on hold at my local library, picked it up and started reading, and I'm now on the third one. Mirror Lake is the third book in this series, and I've just started it. It's as charming already as the others. It takes place in autumn and the mystery itself hasn't happened yet. I'm only like 20 pages in, and with this one I didn't read the blurb either. I just wanted to go in not knowing much because I know I'll enjoy it anyway, which for me is kind of rare with fiction. So I'm glad that I've gotten into a series because I feel like it's been a while since I've gotten into a series as well. Now, in the town of Shady Hollow, there are lots of different animals of different sizes that live together and live in homes, and there's a cute little map at the beginning. I love a map in a book. Very cute. I think it reminds me of being a kid. I loved to draw maps of made up places as a child. And they do have an author's note at the beginning of each book that kind of says, suspend your belief and just go with it, it's fiction. In the author's note of the first book, I think they did mention you could visualize these characters as humans with these animal-like qualities, but I do see them in my head when I read. Kind of like a cartoony version of animals, and you know, wearing little cute clothes and stuff. At the beginning of each book, there's also a cast of characters list, so you can remember who's who. If you need to go back, it just gives you a tiny bit about their personality. But I found all the creatures to be quite easy to remember, and part of that is because it's not like a normal murder mystery thriller. There are lots of charming characters and unlikable characters too, and their characterization is really clear because it helps definitely that they are animals and you see them as the animals in your mind. So you can remember and distinguish between them quite easily, thinking, oh, that's the bear, that's the fox, that's the raven. the animal traits of the characters are reflected in their personalities too. Like Vera is a fox, she's sly and sneaky and curious, and her best friend is a raven, and she happens to love collecting shiny things, and it's you know, a little quirk. It's quite cute. It is a quirky series, and at first I was worried it might be too twee or too quaint kind of for me, and a bit too on the nose or something, but I really like it, and it's good escapism. It gets me thinking about trying to solve what's happened and work it out, but also I want to live in Shady Hollow. These books have me chuckling a lot, and there's a teeny tiny bit of romance which I sort of spotted it was going to be happening in the first book, but I'm not a romance book person, and it's just a little bit, so it's quite cute and just nice. Not too much, not too much. Oh my gosh, as well, the descriptions of the food. All the animals that live there are living in peace and harmony, even if there are predator and prey. Kind of Zootopia vibes. It's like there's an agreement of we're not going to eat each other in a civilized society. So all the food they eat is vegetarian, and the descriptions of the food, it just makes me hungry. Talk about the cakes with the different kinds of nuts, and you know, there's the moose that runs the coffee shop, and it's just cute. The Shady Hollow series is the perfect escape. It has whimsical cottagecore vibes with a mystery element to keep you entertained and engaged. Another fantasy book that I read last month was The Moth Keeper by Kay O'Neill. This is a graphic novel that follows the main character called Anya, who's taken on the responsibility of becoming the moth keeper for her village. The people or creatures in this village are nocturnal, and they believe in and worship the moon spirit, who appears at the very beginning of the book, and as a gift to them gives them moths that help sustain their way of life. This was a sweet graphic novel. It was very visually stunning. The colours were just beautiful, especially I loved the design of the moon spirit and the different characters who were sort of anthropomorphic, like they kind of look human, but some look more animal than others. It's not a fast-paced, plotty book. It's more character-focused and on their internal world and Anya and how she's feeling, especially because she volunteered to take on the role of being the moth keeper, but it's a very important and isolating job because you're separated from your village looking after the moths. You know, you just don't have that connection with your whole village basically because of this job. I was intrigued by the concept of the nocturnal village. The illustrations were beautiful, and I was interested in the kind of mythology and how the village connected with the moon spirit. I felt like there could have been more detail about Anya and her backstory and the other characters. Some of it was in flashbacks about their previous points in their life, but it was quite abstract and vague, and you had to infer a lot. It wasn't spelled out for you, which is fine, but I didn't really connect with Anya that much. I just kind of felt bad for her because she clearly was like sad and has low self-esteem. I felt like there could have been more aspects of her personality shown, and the other characters too. It's also probably because it's just so short that we don't get to know the characters a whole lot. It did get my imagination flowing though, you know, looking at the beautiful illustrations. They were really good. And I actually, before reading that, I had bought the Tea Dragon Society books to read in January, but then I just didn't get to them. And funnily enough, they're written and drawn by the same person, Kay O'Neill. So I want to get to them too. More cozy, whimsical fantasy. Story of the Moth Keeper was okay. It just didn't fully resonate with me, I think, as much as it did other people. But I did love the concept and the art in it the most. Okay, we're on to the last mystery thriller book I read in January, which was Silent Night by who? Nell Patterson. This is a sequel to The Silent House, which I enjoyed. It's not a super tense thriller, but I enjoyed it enough to want to pick up the sequel. Silent Night follows the main character, yet again, Paige Northwood, who is a sign language interpreter, and she is a coder, so child of deaf adults. Her whole family is deaf, and she's the only person of hearing in the family, and she helps police to solve cases that involve the deaf community. In this one, a deaf teenager goes missing from a school trip, and one of the teachers is found dead. I enjoyed this one more than the first book. I felt like maybe the pacing was a bit better, or I don't know, there was just, I think, a bit more to it maybe. There were some interesting discussions about deaf students attending mainstream schools compared to specialist schools, and the different opportunities that each can provide depending on a child's needs. That was quite interesting and very relevant to the times. Again, the representation in this was really great. I am going to read at some point the third one. I think there's only 3 in the series, but the author has written more other books too. I enjoyed this one. The first book I solved, and this one I didn't. I had a few suspects, and kind of obviously everyone is suspicious for different things in these, so it keeps you thinking. I have quite a few notes for the next book, which is Feminism is for Everybody, Passionate Politics by Bell Hooks. I listened to this on an audiobook, and I still don't really know how I felt about it. I kind of feel like a lot of what was discussed I already knew, but also a lot of it kind of felt like the author's opinion, but it was being presented as fact. And even though I agreed with most of her opinions, it kind of, after listening to it via audiobook, I've read some of the comments to help make sense of how I felt about it and how other people thought about it. There was quite a lot of criticism on Goodreads for this book because Hooks doesn't have citations or footnotes in it. I listened via audiobook, so I don't actually know how that would really work. Again, non-fiction books can be hard to rate because some aspects you find really interesting and learn a lot, and others are less interesting or just not as relevant to what you're looking to find out. But when I started reading this, I wasn't really sure what to expect or what aspect of feminism she would be writing about. The first time I'd actually heard about bell hooks was, well, that I recall, was in a video from Reads with Rachel. And I wasn't sure which of her books to start with, but Rachel recommended her books a lot, and her husband had been reading them, and that gave him a better understanding of feminism. I don't really know how I feel about it still. I kind of feel like a lot of what she said I kind of already knew, but there was a lot about, I forget what she called them, like gathering groups to talk about feminist issues, but it probably doesn't help now that the book was written in the year 2000. So even though she talked about things that have historically happened, it doesn't really inform on what's happening now or happened since 2000, obviously. There were a few things she said where I was like, that's outdated now and we know it to be not true. Which was, for example, about people choosing their sexuality, like women choosing to be lesbians so they wouldn't have to deal with men. We know that's not right now. Also, no mention of trans women, I think, from memory. So if you are going to read this, just keep in your mind about when it was written and, just, it's not up to date with the things that we know now. Let's move on. I don't really know how I feel, and that's okay. Following along those lines, I also read 2 books by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I listened to them both via audiobook, and the first one was We Should All Be Feminists, and the second one was Dear Igiawele, or A Feminist Manifesto in 15 Suggestions. The first one, We Should All Be Feminists, I had a copy like ages ago. that when I lived in London, I had a copy that I bought and I just didn't actually read it. Like a lot of books I bought when I was there. At the very beginning of the year, it was a lot of pressure I was putting on myself to make sure that I chose a good book that I would enjoy to start the year with. And I needed to tidy my room. And so I thought, let's look at some audiobooks that I can listen to while I tidy my room. And I think I looked at my Goodreads TBR and there it was. So I listened to it. My room was very messy because you can listen to this audiobook within like an hour, I think. And her voice, her way of speaking is fantastic. She's just captivating and mesmerizing and such a good voice for audiobooks. And I'm very much of the mind that if someone's written a book, they're probably the best person to read it in terms of understanding how they want it to be presented. Obviously, that's not always possible or necessarily the best fit, but I enjoy when I actually hear authors reading their books. Dear Igiawele was not narrated by Adichie. I can't remember who it was. They still did a good job. I just prefer Adichie's voice. And she has a really rich voice and is clearly a fantastic storyteller. I enjoy the listening experience of We Should All Be Feminists more than Dear Igiawele. And also Dear Igiawele I had never heard of before. I think I actually wrote a short review for We Should All Be Feminists, and then I was like, let's look at her other books. And then she'd run an award, and I think she's won multiple awards for other books, and I just never heard of them. There's quite a lot of overlap between the two. I'd say if you're going to read one, I preferred We Should All Be Feminists more, but there's still a lot of merit for Dear Igiawele, and I'm listening to them in the car on my way to work. I was sort of sitting there nodding my head along going, yeah, at different points to the things she said. The way Adichie writes puts into words the things that I have experienced and felt but not necessarily known or been able to eloquently express. It takes her experiences that many women have and is able to share them in a way that not makes sense. There's a better way of explaining it. See, this is why she's the one writing these. I didn't learn anything new, so to speak, but it was more just confirming things I've already experienced and felt myself that a lot of other people and women specifically have, and that was quite powerful. You can also watch We Should All Be Feminists somewhere on YouTube. I think it's a TED Talk. So let's end by me reading a quote to you from We Should All Be Feminists. I won't be able to say it as well as the author herself, but we got to do what we got to do. Some people ask why the word feminist. Why not say you are a believer in human rights or something like that? Because that would be dishonest. Feminism is, of course, part of human rights in general, but to choose to use the vague expression human rights is to deny the specific and particular problem of gender. It would be a way of pretending that it was not women who have, for centuries, been excluded. It would be a way of denying that the problem of gender targets women, that the problem was not about being human, but specifically about being a female human. Ooh, it hurts. Those were the 7 books I read. Thank you for watching this reading wrap up with me. I'm going to be making more videos. I think I'll be making a video about my goals, reading goals for 2024. I know it's February already, but I have a life and this isn't my job, and so I don't have all the time in the world to just make videos. I wish I could sometimes. I'm starting to get more into non-fiction. I think there's quite a variety of non-fiction out there, obviously, but just finding ones that I'm into. I think I always thought reading non-fiction as recreation was a bit pretentious, maybe, and that's just not accurate. If I had to choose between reading fiction or reading non-fiction for the rest of my life, I would clearly choose fiction, but there's still a place for non-fiction. I'm just trying to expand my reading horizons a little bit. And I prefer listening to non-fiction rather than reading the physical. I think it helps me more, even though I'm not an auditory learner. All the weird human things. Human beings are weird. I should show you something funny. ASMR. I made an impulse purchase because I want to read in bed more, but my arms get tired after a while from holding the book up like this, and you know, sometimes you just want to lie flat. And also, I don't know if I'd wear these in public though. I don't know if I'm game yet. But I got prism glasses so that you can see. So now I can just see my legs. Hi. It's a bit like virtual reality. I know they're the dorkiest looking things ever, but they bring me and anyone who comes to my house and tries them on so much joy. I've been blabbing for a while. It's time to go. All right, see ya.